Welcome to the Art of Adventure podcast. I'm your host, Mac Tegg. I'm an illustrator, and I created this podcast to get to know other artists who are creating fantasy and sci-fi artwork. Joining me today is Perplexing Ruins. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
To start off, let me ask, how old are you, and when did you first get into the fantasy genre?
I'm 37, and I guess like most people when you're a kid, reading fantasy books and stuff. I'm pretty new to this whole scene, in fact. I guess when I was a kid, like a lot of people grew up in my time, I played Magic quite a bit. That was probably my main thing, and some of the Final Fantasy games on Super Nintendo. And then I kind of fell off for a long, long time. I didn't play computer games or any of that. I didn't read novels about fantasy novels or anything.
Yeah, I'm actually exactly the same, pretty much.
Oh, really? Yeah. It seems to be a lot of people maybe found the pandemic was a good impetus to tap into some of their old interests or things like that.
Definitely. Yeah, I think being able to play like games online, like tabletop RPG games with people like over Discord has really reminded people like just how fun it is.
Yeah, I've never once played with another person.
Really?
So,
you mean
I've never experienced that.
Like in person or online or anything? Either.
I've never played a role-playing game with another individual.
Oh,
ever.
Wow. Well, I'd play with you happily anytime.
Yeah, all right. It's interesting. I guess basically what happened was I was just kind of hanging around making a bunch of paintings of my own and doing my own thing. And then I'm not sure what sparked it, but I thought to look into D&D. I guess I'm a curious person, and I wonder what's going on. And it didn't appeal to me, really. But then I started finding so I guess I got into print and play board games first. There's a huge, cool scene of people doing wicked cool stuff, like card games, mini board games. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I kind of segued into playing aspects of that. And then, so for me, I kind of had more of a board game component, I guess, initially. Mm-hmm. And then I started seeing people doing solo stuff, and then I really nerded out and just looked at a ton of videos and read a ton of Reddit stuff, mm-hmm. and became pretty quickly obsessed. And probably not even so much by gaming as the creativity of it all. Because I had always known of D&D, and then boom, all of a sudden you realize there's thousands of awesome pieces of non-D&D art and pamphlets and zines and trifolds of people who don't even mention Dungeons and Dragons or any of that stuff, and it blew my mind. And I've always been attracted to that kind of thing, that sort of scene-based stuff and DIY, so...
Is Reddit how you got involved with the OSR community?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I just was looking for people writing about it, and Reddit was really accessible because people were communicating and being polite and nice, and I, like I said, I just couldn't believe the creativity going on. Uh-huh. And then one day I posted one of my drawings, and somebody said, "Whoa, that's really cool." And have you heard of Troika? That was actually what somebody asked me, and that was actually the very first book I bought was Troika, and I'd never seen anything like that before. I just flipped through it endlessly. I thought it was so rad.
Yeah, it's got some.
And that was it. And then I just never stopped looking at stuff.
How long have you been working with traditional artwork?
My whole life. I did go to art school, so I have a degree in fine art, I guess, for whatever that's worth.
Nice.
So yeah, I've been doing that for quite a while, though.
Okay.
I was pretty much obsessed with it for years.
What kind of stuff were you doing before you started going the fantasy route?
Yeah, my favorite area of painting is contemporary European art. Mm-hmm. So I'm really obsessed with painters like Gerhard Richter, Luc Tuymans, Mama Andersson's probably my favorite painter. Victor Mon, he's an awesome Romanian artist. So like really weird European painters and stuff is really where I'm at. Kai Althoff. So that's where I come from, is like this real contemporary art vibe. So I've looked at tens and tens of thousands of paintings, studied painters and artists.
How were you introduced to these artists?
Well, in art school, you just start looking at stuff. And then there's a breakthrough publication came out called Vitamin D back in the early 2000s. And it was like a giant, beautifully produced hardcover compendium of 100 or more contemporary artists with about 4 to 5 plates by each of them. And me and all my friends were like, whoa, the world's way bigger. And I never stopped, man. I just got obsessed. That's what I tend to do. I flew to Europe and like went to this famous art factory in Leipzig that a lot of these artists I like worked at, see if I could meet one of them or not, and saw where some of them worked. And like, I really got into it. And so I was making a lot of my own paintings were like photographic based. So the first show I did was 16 paintings, acrylic on canvas, with like projected photographs I'd found on the wall. It was all about spiritualism in World War I. So like I did a trench map, and I did all these like weird photographs of like ectoplasm and like haunted landscapes and like people moving through landscapes and stuff. And so I was just really into that. So it was kind of like occultism without all the symbols and stuff, I guess. I just found that really fascinating. And that show was called There Was No Sound. That was my very first show. And then...
you seem to be a fan of trying different medias.
Totally.
I noticed a lot of ink and gouache, and I saw some fabric work, which was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that comes from studying Anselm Kiefer. He's a German contemporary artist, and he'll like make these like 25-foot paintings with dirt and clothes and grass and seeds and lead and like real alchemic style paintings. So real early on in my schooling, I started like nailing chunks of wood to canvases and like did a lot of transfers. I'd dumpster dive and find like all these old booklets and like rip out all these notes from like 1932 somebody had scrawled in there and like transfer them onto my canvases and like dump crap on them. My department hated it, but it was a lot of fun. And so I never learned how to draw real well. Like I wasn't interested in that. I just never knew how to illustrate. I just wasn't a good draftsman ever, or a good painter for that matter. I like energy, I guess. And so that was like, I kind of skipped a lot of my training, technical training, and just started looking at stuff I liked. The felt paintings came around about a year and a half ago. I was really bored, and I was like, I got to do something. And I really love fabric. I don't sew or anything, but I love like weird costumes. And I came across a National Geographic article about the wild men of Europe. One of the most impactful things I've ever read in my life. Where this guy went all over Europe documenting like these, I guess, sort of paganish costumes people would wear for like celebrations in Europe, like harvest celebrations. And these costumes were mind-boggling amazing. And now in hindsight, I realize they look like some of the best monsters in RPG fantasy games. Like people would be wearing like giant straw costumes with bells and rags hanging off of them to be like a bear or whatever, and so I wanted to do that. So I went to the store. I think I ripped up like an old punk t-shirt I had and just like glued it on a canvas or something. And I was like, oh, and then the felt kind of clicked. And one day I spent like 6 hours cutting strips of felt and used a whole bottle of matte medium and glued it onto a canvas. And then from then on out, that's what I just did for about a year. Super tedious, really expensive, really big. Like the biggest one I did was like 4.5 by 3 foot or 5 foot by 4 foot or something. Wow. So I'd like put it on the ironing board and stand up at 2 a.m. and like glue crap to it. And anyway, sorry. That's where I came from.
Is anyone else in your family artistic at all?
Yeah, my mom grew up doing a bunch of artsy stuff. She'd like watch Bob Ross paint and like do ceramics. It's totally layman's Midwest like hobby art stuff. And then my dad was a welder. He would make models every night. So I was constantly surrounded by him making things. And my grandfather was a leather worker, so I would help him make stuff, cut leather and sharpen his knives and glue stuff. So I've always been gluing and making stuff since I was real young.
Did you have anyone who like really encouraged your artistic endeavors?
I suppose my mother mostly did that. My old man told me not to do art. So, yeah, it was just my mom, I guess, in a little bit. But mostly it was my own interests. I just decided to make pictures. That's what I like to do. It's how I respond to the world around me. I don't interact with people terribly well, so pictures and books is how I get by.
I've noticed lately you're doing a lot of black and white, like ink work and like a lot of gouache. Do you have any preferred tools that you really like working with?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've only ever painted with acrylic paint. That's the only thing I've ever used. And then I got some gouaches to try out something once, and they go on real beautifully, especially if you get quality gouache. And I'd never seen a that black before. Mm-hmm. Like I had been painting with black acrylic on paper. Yeah. And it gets this weird sheen, but when gouache dries, it's so beautiful. It's like velvet. And so I bought some nice gouaches, and I've not stopped using them since. They're just really fun to use. So brush and gouache. And I was doing a lot of black and white. I did a lot of color early on. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that a lot of people publish with black and white. So I tried doing more, honestly, just so I could try and get published and get paid occasionally. I've been unemployed for quite a while now, so for various reasons. So, I thought, I could help my poor wife out if I try to sell a drawing or two. So I started doing more black and white. And now I'll do whatever I want and just make whatever I want because it's fun.
I noticed you have like images that people can use on your Patreon, correct?
Yeah, I put a lot on there, I hope.
What inspired you to be so generous?
Am I being that's generous? Oh, that's great to hear. That's nice.
Yeah, I mean it's $2.50 a month, and anyone can use any of your images that are on there. Right?
On the Patreon, yeah, there's quite a bit. I put like a castle pack and decorative packs. I don't know. I guess I just so the very first thing I ever did when I got into the art world was created a co-op art gallery in my small town. I got a bunch of people together, and I asked my school department to do it, and they wouldn't. So when I graduated, I went and got 7 other people and bought this place and ripped everything out, painted it, put in track lighting. And we put on like 8 shows in 12 months at that space, and it was the best attended gallery in my city. Wow. And it was all this cool art, like really cool stuff nobody ever got to show. And that was, to this day, one of the things I'm most proud of in my whole life. And it was really cool. And at the same time, I worked for the art museum, and I created a college night event and gave a whole bunch of college kids their first exhibition at a museum. And I think that's part of how I do things. Like, I love sharing. I'm like a super enthusiastic dude. So I love sharing, and that's when I got into this scene. I was like, oh my God, people are publishing these games for free, or I would never be able to afford these things, but these people were sharing. And so my Patreon, I guess, is an extension of trying to just give back, be part of that. I mean, I hope people find it generous. I mean, some of my patrons have made really rad stuff already using some of those images. I'm really stoked about that. It makes me happy. I don't know. I think the whole scene jives with how I have always done things. I've written a number of book reviews. I used to be really into literature, so I published a bunch of book reviews and wrote essays and stuff. And now I've written multiple reviews on games on my blog for like small indie games. So I don't know. I guess sharing, helping is how it should be. That's a long answer, sorry.
No, it's fine. Speaking of games, you've created a card-based RPG system called Draw RPG. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. I guess that was me trying to just do what everybody else is doing and like learning how to play by making, you know? So, and everybody does dice. And so I thought card game would be cool. I don't know, because if you had one deck of cards, you could go on a road trip. I've traveled a whole bunch in my life, so like one deck of cards in your back pocket, a book in the other back pocket, and you're good, you know? And so, yeah, that's really in development still. I'm currently rewriting it to turn it into I got a bunch of feedback. It's based on like 30 Years War type era of Europe, 1600s, but pretending all the poetry by like Donne and Alexander Pope and Dante really happened, and angels and demons really exist, and alchemy is a real thing, and that's the vibe I'm going for. So it borrows a lot from Troika. It borrows from like weird stuff, but it's also rooted in kind of gritty, Inquisition Europe and stuff like that.
Speaking of which, what other forms of media do you pull inspiration from?
Everything. Everything. No, I know that sounds ridiculous. I check out 30 books at a time. I watch a lot of film. I watch a lot of TV. I don't distinguish between campy and, I'll watch a 7-hour film from a European person and then watch like BBC historical fiction TV. I like it all.
What are some of your favorite films?
Let's see. I really love that movie Field in England that came out a couple years ago. Did you see that? That was really awesome. The name slips my mind now. It's based off of the novel Melancholy of Resistance by Laszlo Krasznahorkai. Bela Tarr turned it into a film. Same guy who made Satan Tango, but I don't remember the name of the film. But that's one of my all-time favorite films. There's a great scene in the beginning where a guy like illustrates the cosmos with a bunch of drunken peasants in a bar. And it's one of the most beautiful 15 minutes in any film I've ever seen ever. I love The Seventh Seal. It's a really great movie.
Yeah.
Oh, Moon is one of my all-time favorite movies. I love Another Earth. That's a great film if you haven't seen it. So yeah, I like kind of sci-fi stuff, I guess.
Would you be potentially working on any sci-fi style artwork for any projects in the future?
Man, I'd love to do that. I'm not good at drawing like machines and architecture. There's some artists out there that are just masters at that. See, the name slips me now, but the artist who draws for Mothership, who did a lot of those portraits, were I find just totally amazing. I could never do that. I don't have the skills for that. But yeah, short answer is I'd love to do that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I think your artwork has a certain like organic quality that I think would be really interesting in a sci-fi kind of setting.
Oh, thank you. That's really nice of you to say. I love forests. That's probably my biggest inspiration. So, forests and castles.
Yeah, I live out in the woods, so I definitely understand that.
Oh, I envy that.
Where in the world are you?
I'm in the Midwest currently.
Nice. Yeah, I grew up in the Midwest.
Yeah. Yeah, I've lived in Colorado and Oregon and Europe, so I've kind of been around.
Those sound like a lot of great places, especially the Midwest. But yeah, I'm in upstate New York now.
Oh, man. I did a road trip like a few years ago for 6 months cross country, and I almost stayed in upstate New York. It was so awesome. Catskills, and
it's beautiful.
It looks like a place you could spend your life at.
Definitely.
You're lucky.
Do you have any artists that you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
A lot of people in the scene know a lot of the great illustrators. The first probably illustrator I really began looking at tonight was actually your first guest, LFOSR. I saw those and I was like, oh, because of the landscapes, and you had mentioned that in your interview. I love landscapes quite a bit. So his work's some of the best that I've looked at a lot. There's this artist I follow on Instagram, Graham Cranfield makes these really strange, like, color marker drawings. I just think they're really amazing. Subterranean Ocean Survey does these, like, super obsessive line drawings. I don't know. I wish I could do that. Like, I find those stunning because there's got to be a million more marks in those drawings.
Yeah.
They're really amazing. There's a guy, Joachim Drescher. He does really great illustrations. And then for, like, European artists, go check out Mama Andersson. She's totally stunning. I flew to New York once to meet her because she lived in Sweden, and I got to see her paintings in person. And I was just floored. I had never seen anything like them before. Victor Mon, he's a Romanian artist, does these, like, weird installation paintings. So good. Joachim Nordstrom does all these cool pencil collages. These people will blow you away, and I think they should all be in RPGs. I think I'm looking forward to people like that being published someday. So that's kind of a lot of stuff I look at.
But yeah, I also want to hear about Dreadfort.
Dreadfort started as a business card for the Business Card Jam. That was last month, which there's great stuff on there. If you haven't checked out the Business Card Jam, it's amazing. And I made Dreadfort. I had that painting of, like, this mountain king guy that I've always really loved.
Yeah.
And it's, like, red with a spike-helmed knight guy. And I got out my big compendium of Henri Michaud book, which is like he was a surrealist guy who did a bunch of speed and did, like, a bunch of crazy gesture drawings. And basically I flipped through that book and just put my finger on words and just started writing weird texts sort of based off of his texts in a lot of ways, like chapter headings or bits of poetry. And then trying to fuse it with some fantasy. So, like, I don't know, things like dragons that cry tears of Mercury and weird stuff like that, It got kind of dark, and then I turned it into a pamphlet and expanded that section on the back and drew a map for it with Encounter and turned it into, like, a little adventure and drew my own map for it inside, which needs a lot of work. I'm trying to redraw the map, but that's a hard skill in its own right. And I think it's pretty cool. It's, like, fun. It's just like a little adventure where people, you go through this mountain, so you go through the streets. It's based off of Marburg, which is this medieval town in Germany where the Brothers Grimm studied. And I had this experience in Marburg one night walking through. It was really misty and late and dark. And my wife and I were walking through town, and then we heard a choir singing. And the town's kind of tiered, like a lot of those old towns are. And we could hear this, and we followed it through the windy alley and streets and came to this church and watched choir practice at, like, 10 p.m. And it was just wicked. And that's always, like, haunted me. So then I turned Dreadfort into, like, that. But instead of a choir, there's, like, this awful stuff going on.
What are you working on now?
I'm doing a couple of little commissions here and there for people. I just finished one for a really cool guy who makes content for solo players called RPG Tips. So I just made a little drawing for one of his things he's working on. And some other various little projects. And then I don't know if I can talk about it quite yet or not, but I just signed on to do a really, really big project that's going to take all my energy over the next 3 months to do.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I'm trying to finish a module that I began writing for Cairn. If you haven't seen Cairn, really awesome game, like Into the Odd fantasy, forest fantasy by Yoshai Gale. So I've been illustrating, like, beasts and stuff for bestiary for that. And I'm trying to write a module, but I'm not a good writer, so it's taking me a long time. But I'm doing all the illustrations for it and all the hex map and all that stuff. And it's got some cool stuff, I think.
Where can people keep tabs on what you're up to?
I tend to be on Twitter quite a bit, I guess. I just joined Twitter for the first time, like, this year in my life, and I was amazed at how cool it can be. And now I'm learning how awful it can be at the same time. But I tend to post on there a lot under Perplexing Ruins, and then I have an Instagram under the same, and I probably post too frequently, but when I decided to join this scene, I just got so excited that I'm just always, like, happy to share stuff. So It's probably not super slick, but I'm posting a lot, maybe almost daily, a drawing a day if I can.
Wow.
And then I have a website. I just built a website, perplexingruins.com, with all my portfolio. And then I have a blog, perplexingruins.blogspot. And I write reviews there. I'm always trying to share other people's work and talk about other people's work and then show my stuff too, because it's fun.
Yeah, I've noticed you have a lot of pictures of games you're playing on your Instagram. What would you recommend on the spot if somebody is looking for a new game to play?
Well, Cairn is a great game. Cairn's really easy to pick up, real easy to run and do. That's a fun game. One of the games I've been seriously most impressed with, and I try to pick up everything this person puts out, is Vaults of Varn. It's like a dying earth, desert, sci-fi, post-apoc mashup game. And that guy's doing all of his own stuff, and it's amazing. Like, he's put out 2 zines so far. And then another one I really love is Rogueland by Caverns of Heresy. It's got like all these tables and tools. So as a solo player, as a person new to RPGs, I think it's one of the best products you can pick up, actually. Just because he condensed all these important components into a short zine, so people can run it without reading 300 pages or whatever. But it's not just tables. Like, there's rules for exploration and stuff. So I really love that one. So those 3, and then one of my favorites that I wrote about real early on is Weird North by Jim Parkin. Just because it's a different tone and it has some really great character generation stuff going on that I love. So I'd recommend those.
Is there anything you'd like to add as we close out this interview?
No, I mean, I have a lot of fun. I joined this scene completely on a whim and then was blown away by the generosity and the creativity and the gusto. And I feel like I'm becoming an old guy. So it gave me a new way to direct a lot of my interests and energy, and I'm so happy and grateful for it. So I don't know, be generous and share stuff, and I don't know, that kind of thing, I guess.
Well, I'd say that's a pretty positive message to close on. I just want to thank you for being on the show and taking time out of your day to chat with me. It was
a real
quite
pleasure.
Fun.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, the pleasure's all mine. All right, thanks again. Have a good night.
Have a great day. Thanks.
Yeah. If you'd like to follow the show on social media, check out theartofadventurecast.com. And if you'd like to see some of my artwork, check out macteg.com. This has been the Art of Adventure podcast. Thank you for listening.